We weren't supposed to be here, but we are. We're stuck because of some very big problems that happened with the UK air traffic control, which meant we couldn't fly home. There's worse places to be stuck, Tommy, whilst we do our driver ratings from Zandvoort. Right, let's get into the driver ratings. Logan Sargent. Oh, wow, that was a big He started 10th, finished DNF. I would like to say that he was all right this weekend. He got into Q3. Williams were looking quite promising, especially in the hands of Alex Albon. But he did also have a couple of crashes. One big crash at the end of Q3, and then another one during the race, which was apparently a hydraulic issue.
Go for it.
7 out of 10 for me for Loki Bear. I think it was a promising race weekend. The mistake in qualifying, that was him. The race, not so sure, but that's going to cost the team quite a lot of money.
Indeed. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Logie Bear. Yeah, maybe seems a bit harsh, but then he did crash. And I do have to look at that teammate deficit as well. You know, Logan did a good job to get into Q3, but then, you know, Albon's there qualifying 4th and topping certain sessions and things as well. Obviously, Logan is a rookie.
Alex Albon up next, started 4th, finished 8th.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Alex Albon, and I think he's just driving unbelievably well. Had a really good weekend, despite Albon chose the wrong, and his team chose the wrong thing there, yet he still managed to recover into the points and had a really good drive. So amazing quali, great recovery drive. I think what might have been if it had just been a dry, normal race. You know, we said maybe a podium, who knows? But yeah, Albon's just driving so well, and it's a deserved 9 for me.
I've also gone for a 9 out of 10, so no surprises there either, because of the fact of coming back from so far behind. He stayed on the softs. He was on the softs, I think, for 45 laps. Yeah, Alex was incredibly impressive this weekend, and I feel like some of our ratings have to kind of give benefit of the doubt to some of the drivers for the strategy calls that were made, because of the fact it was a roll of the dice in a lot of ways. Some got it right, some got it very wrong, but the drivers that perhaps got it wrong but still managed to push their way through deserve a decent grade. So Alex, 9 out of 10 for him. Well done. Liam Lawson now started 19th, finished 13th. I'm going to give Liam Lawson a 9 out of 10. It was incredibly impressive what he managed to do. He would have been forgiven by almost everybody, I think, if he had crashed out of that race at some point. It was a baptism of fire for Liam coming into that team, into Formula One, with only one practice session, and then straight into qualifying, and then straight into one of the most chaotic races you could ever have imagined for a debutant. So to finish 13th in the end, 3 places off the points, that could have easily happened in that kind of race. He should be very proud of what he's done.
Yeah, I've gone for a 9 out of 10 as well. You just thought, he's going to finish last, but you wouldn't blame him. And somehow, he's not finished last. He's not spun off in those absolutely crazy conditions. Top drivers made mistakes in that race, and you couldn't have asked for any more difficult debut, like you mentioned. So really good. Maybe if he keeps performing well, could cause AlphaTauri a few headaches.
We shall see. Moving to his teammate Yuki Tsunoda now, started 17th, finished 16th.
Yuki Tsunoda's a difficult driver to rate, I think. I've gone for a 7 out of 10, which maybe seems quite high when he finished 16th. He was running right up the front. Good strategy that they pitted early, took that gamble, and it paid off. And then Yuki was actually running in a really good position at the end. I think he was as high as 4th at one point, thinking he's near the podium here. And then it's just that AlphaTauri thing and it seems to happen a lot with Yuki, where he's having a brilliant result and then just doesn't seem to work, and he just falls off a cliff and disappears.
This is probably the highest grade anyone's ever received for a 16th place, but I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda, because he was defending like a lion when he was up there right at the front, fighting with, I think, the Mercedes, and he was driving incredibly well, and he was let down by his team in a lot of ways. AlphaTauri You know, they seem to get away reasonably scot-free with all of their blunders that they seem to make in their strategy department. But no, I think he was driving incredibly well, and he was just really unfortunate to not get a result, and I think he really did deserve at least some points. Nico Hulkenberg now started 14th, finished 12th. Has to give me a headache, because I don't know what they're doing. I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Nico, because it was an alright result. Again, he beat his teammate despite Kevin Magnussen running in 5th, I think it was at one point. And Nico just proving again that he has got a massive upper hand over K-Mag. And that's really the only way I can judge where Haas is supposed to be, is by his teammate. Nico, reasonably, I mean, quiet race considering there was 186 overtakes. But yeah, again, it's all right. I think it's decent because I think that Haas is probably the worst car on the grid, I would say now.
Yeah. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Hulkenberg, which maybe expected a little more in a race that is his kind of conditions, that maybe he might have found himself up where, but it's just so difficult because the Haas is awful. It's just such a rubbish car that is not doing well on its tyres. Not great for Haas at the moment.
We now go to Kevin Magnussen, who started from the pit lane and finished 14th.
Yeah, gone for a 4 out of 10. You know, he's got his new contract, but then he binned it in FP3, which actually meant that they had to run old spec parts on the car because they'd just changed them and K-Mag wrote them off. He was one of the drivers that made the call, because he started from the pits, and then made the call on the second lap that I might as well go for it here because I'm dead last. Worked really well, but then just fell back again. I don't think Magnussen's having a very good season at all, to be honest, even despite his car problems.
Yeah, no, I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for K-Mag. Straight down the middle, I think he should be reasonably commended for being one of those to roll the dice and it working. And he was up there fighting, but he just didn't have the pace. I think Haas in general don't have the pace, but K-Mag is slower than Nico at the moment. Lance Stroll now started 11th, finished 11th. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 for Lance. Fernando Alonso is making a mockery of this man this year, completely and utterly trouncing him. To not score points in, again, conditions that Lance Stroll from a few years ago you would think is going to be right in there, a bit of a wet weather specialist, pole at Turkey, all those stuff that gets thrown around. He just doesn't do that anymore. No. Like, he just doesn't deliver in dry races or crazy condition races now. So what is he doing? Where is he delivering? Nowhere.
Yeah, I've gone for a 3 out of 10. This should be a race that he's good at, and the more wet to dry races or wet weather races that we have and Lance still isn't delivering, I feel like he's just losing that tag now of where you think, oh well, if it's, we get to see what Stroll's actually all about when it's wet, but I don't feel like that has happened since probably what feels like Turkey.
Let's talk about his teammate now. Fernando Alonso started 5th, finished 2nd.
Yeah, I try not to fanboy too hard this one, but it's difficult because 10 out of 10, I think it's one of the drives of the year, to be honest. He's qualified to that car in 5th when, they had updates and stuff, but I think Aston Martin have been struggling recently, and we've seen that in the hands of Stroll. Wet to dry conditions this year, other than Max, Alonso's the only one that can take it to Max in those conditions and seems to raise his level even more. His move at turn 3 was just one of those moves where you're like, how is a 42-year-old schooling all the other drivers when they're, do you know what I mean? Like, he's thinking of these things, and I think
it's experience, isn't it?
It's experience, and he's using his head as well as his great, driving skills as well. So, yeah, just absolute masterful drive.
I've also gone for a 10 out of 10 for Fernando. No other grade is deserving for this man. Lap 1 was incredibly impressive in crazy wet conditions. It was just showing that this man has a feel for the car that not many other drivers do. And then his pace at the end was miraculous as well. You could tell he was like, right, this is the line that Max is driving at the end. I'm going to drive an entirely different line and hope to God it's a bit quicker in certain points. That was, again, if he just follows them round, if he followed the drivers round turn 3 like everyone else was doing, he wouldn't have made that dive bomb work because it was slower, but he could slot his car in front of, I think it was Russell, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah.
And that's a position gain. That's the kind of racecraft that Fernando Alonso has that, as I say, not many other drivers do. Valtteri Bottas now started 18th, finished 15th. Oh, Bottas. 4 out of 10. He had the worser strategy. I'm just bored of Bottas being bad. BBB, really. He was terrible in qualifying. He was basically last because Liam Lawson was the only driver that qualified slower than him. And it's just sad to see. I feel like a broken record really about Valtteri, but then every single race he doesn't do anything more special than the one that's just gone. So yeah, 4 out of 10.
Gone for a 5 for Bottas, and he only gets that extra grade just from a good start that I don't think we actually saw on the cameras. And it was a cool it was a cool start. Like, you know, he came through the field, but
changed my grade to 5. I've changed it to 5. Yeah, because I literally showed you that video as well, and I forgot about it.
It was a cool start, especially because he was making those moves, but had the wrong strategy. But again, like, Alpha aren't improving, and it concerns me a lot. Not great.
Sad times. Zhou Guanyu now started 15th, finished DNF.
Gone for a 4 out of 10 for Zhou because he crashed out the race. Otherwise, I think he would have got a pretty good grade because, you know, he gambled at the start, was running second. Of course, there's some good fortune, but then you can argue that, you know, the drivers are the ones there that can just come into the pits and decide they want to do it, and that's exactly what Zhou Guanyu did. He dropped back. It's just sad that the Alpha just don't have that pace to even challenge anything. There was so much of the race left that they just plummeted down the order. The reason it's not like a 2 or a 3 for crashing is it was absolutely apocalyptic. It's those crazy conditions, but still have to downgrade him for a mistake.
Yeah, he's the one that ended up in the wall at the end of the day. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 as well for Zhou. The mediums wasn't the right call at all because it just didn't have the pace in those conditions, in the slightly slippery conditions that were at the track, and you know, you needed those softer, easier to warm up tyres. I think it's as simple as that, really. Oscar Piastri now started 8th, finished 9th. I'm going to go with a 6 out of 10 for Oscar. He made some good moves. He made a great move into Valtteri Bottas that Crofty decided to commentate as if it was the last lap of Abu Dhabi 2021. I can't really give any higher because Piastri there were some mistakes in him this weekend, and also it's just a bit of a missed opportunity, I think, for both Oscar and the McLaren team. You know, because there is on one side this element of understanding of, okay, well, we can't grade the drivers too badly if they make the wrong strategy call, but then on the other side, as I continue to talk about this, I'm like, well, the drivers could literally come into the pits and change the strategy like Charles Leclerc did, and then he sat there for 15 seconds whilst the team tried to find his intermediate tyres. But yeah, I think it's a 6 for me.
I've also gone for a 6. He had good pace, but yeah, I think qualifying, actually, when you look at it, 8th when your teammate's on the front row.
He had a bad last lap, didn't he? That was when the track was ramping up, and he just didn't deliver on that.
He was one of the ones, I think, that just stayed on the dries until it dried and just kind of went so far in that it was just kind of like, well, we've got to accept this now.
Lando Norris started 2nd, finished 7th.
So I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Lando. Basically just one more than Piastri because he beat him. Similar kind of race, really. His whole race was ruined by that bad strategy call, and it's a what might have been, but he came through the field, nearly got Hamilton, actually, and the more I think about it, I'm going to change. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10 because I did think he did a good recovery drive. You mentioned this about the whole strategy thing. This is where I struggle to know how much weight to put towards it, because I listened to that team radio from Lando and it was painful to listen to that his team's there telling him, stay out, you're quicker than the drivers on the Inters, when he's being passed by all of them and he can see it. So obviously from that side it's McLaren's fault, but then this is something that we would always mention, particularly someone like Charles Leclerc, that's like, you need to stand up to your team, you need to say, no, absolutely not, I'm coming in, I know the right thing to do. And that's something that we saw actually in the race from, you said Charles, also Max Verstappen did it as well, where you're making that right call from your own decision of, I know what's right.
All right, you've convinced me. I was going to give a 7, but now I've gone for an 8 as well, because Lando did drive very well back through the field. That team radio was so painful to listen to. He even was like, "Are you stupid?" Like, he was genuinely like baffled. It felt like a prank. The fact that they were like, "Oh, you're quicker than the Intercars," as they're all flying past him, and he was 15 seconds a lap slower. But yeah, Lando still did a very good job, I'd say, to still score some decent points. And it's a shame because he started on the front row of the grid, and it felt like 3 years ago that he started on the front row of the grid when we actually finished that race. So yeah, it was still a solid drive from him. Pierre Gasly started 12th, finished 3rd. 10 out of 10. Easy peasy. It's between him and Alonso, I think, for best drive. It was just so good from him. He was there throughout. As soon as that strategy put him into the mix, he managed to deliver. Yeah, he was very happy afterwards. His team radio was amazing to hear. It literally sounded like he'd won the race and Max had finished 3rd, but it was the other way around. And even with the 5-second penalty as well, he still managed to secure P3, which just shows how good of a race he had.
Yeah, I've gone for a 10 out of 10 as well. Of course, there's a bit of fortune there that he's thrust his way up the field with that strategy call, but again, like we said, he's made the decision. Gasly seems to thrive when he's at the front and actually gets into those positions, so really good from Gasly. Yeah, it was one of those things where he got there and you're like, well, he's going to definitely drop back, and he was just staying there. He was fighting.
That was your biggest flop talking in your head. You're like, well, he's going to drop back. Then I'll get the point, because then I can be like, oh, well, he dropped away from a podium position.
Yeah, but no, he drove really well to essentially stay in that front fight, which is extremely impressive.
Well done, Pierre Gasly. We now go to Esteban Ocon. Started 16th, finished 10th.
Gone for a 6 out of 10 for Ocon. Qualified extremely poorly, but then he sort of like made his way slowly through the field and kind of did quite a good recovery drive. But then the wet tyre thing was a very odd choice. They left him out quite late, and then I guess he went for another crazy gamble. But like we said in the race review podcast, the wets are so useless now, and if it gets to the point where you're using them, they're just going to red flag the race, that you're never really going to get the rewards for it.
I've also gone for a 6 out of 10 for Esti Bestie. Of course, he got a point. The wets was a gamble that is very questionable. I guess it was the right one. If we hadn't have had a red flag, which was obviously always going to be flown with how bad the conditions were, then Ocon may have got a podium, because everyone would have been perhaps getting their oars out. So yeah, it's a shame for Ocon, but 6 out of 10 I think is fair. Lewis Hamilton started 13th, finished 6th. I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Lewis. Might have been a 9 had he not had a poor quali, but then again that was down to blocking as opposed to delivering lap times. But then again, it was constantly changing, constantly evolving, and there's obviously partly himself to blame for not putting in a lap at the end. Yeah, it was an amazing recovery drive though, the way in which he came back from last position. I'm surprised he didn't take that into his own hands. I think the majority of times he would have gone in and gone onto the intermediates, because you go, well, Jesus Christ, look at this last sector. But Mercedes obviously decided that wasn't going to be the case. Lewis didn't overturn it, and he could have been on the podium. He could have won the race. He was saying he could have challenged Max.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10. Yeah, it's borderline 8 and 9 for me. It's a great recovery drive. The quali was bad, and then the fact that he's kind of plummeted down the order, but whether I believe that he could have challenged Max, I don't know. I think second could have been an option, but to recover from basically being last and then making some moves. And one thing I actually really like about his drive, I kind of saw that old school Lewis Hamilton where he made some dive bombs and some brave moves around the outside, which we like to see those overtakes and stuff, and it was really cool to see Hamilton sort of making those bold moves again and going around the outside of people and going wheel to wheel. So yeah, it was good recovery drive.
Lovely stuff. We now go to George Russell. Started 3rd, finished 17th.
I have gone for 7 out of 10 for George Russell. Yeah, quite high grade for 17th, but I think he was very unlucky. You know, he's qualified extremely well. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, Mercedes did not have the best strategy, but he could have so easily, you know, still got some solid points if it wasn't for the contact at the end. It's a solid drive that's just like a very unlucky result.
Yeah, I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for George. Staying out was not the right call. Then he was getting himself back into it. He went with the hards a massively long time and got himself back into contention to finish, I think, behind Lewis, I think it was at the time, and then was battling Norris at the end, obviously, and then had a small, tiny bit of contact, which then cost him those points. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for George. Carlos Sainz now started 6th, finished 5th. We've gone for a 10 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. It's the lowest finish 10 out of 10 we've had probably all year. But I was so utterly impressed by how Carlos drove this weekend. That Ferrari was shocking. In every condition, in every practice session, in every session, that Ferrari looked like a dog. But he came out of nowhere and was fighting when those conditions changed. He deserves merit and plaudits for that. I don't think he could have literally done anything more in that Ferrari this weekend. I'm absolutely baffled that Ferrari scored any points this weekend, and Carlos to finish 5th is miraculous.
Ooh, I've gone for a 9 out of 10, but after listening to that, I'm almost tempted by a 10. And then I also just remembered that he didn't do FP1 as well. Yeah, I'm going to go for a 10 for Carlos. Why not? Let's go.
Let's go.
What it actually reminded me of, and a little P1 exclusive, little tiny spoiler to one of his answers, but he mentioned that you have drives in your career where you're driving a car that can't win, and you have had, you know, the best drive of your career, but you've got nothing to show for it. And actually, this drive from Carlos reminds me of those kind of what we've said about Fernando Alonso in the past, where you're like, how has he got that car to 5th? Or you know, he's got the absolute maximum out of that car. And I think this may even be Carlos's best, probably Carlos's best drive of the last couple of years. He seemed completely on top of that car, which was horrendous and looked an absolute dog to drive. Well done, Carlos.
Hell yeah. We now go to Charles Leclerc. Started 9th, finished DNF.
Yeah, I'm actually in the same room as you now, so it's awkward. But going for a 4 out of 10 for Charles. Of course, crashed in quali, he's pushing hard, but it's another mistake creeping into his game. The collision with Piastri can happen, but it's lap 1 of a race that you think there's so much of the race still to go. It's not like a slam dunk, like, oh, it's absolutely his fault, but it's just like clumsy contact at the start. You know, he made a good call to come into the pits, even though tyres weren't ready for him. But he has to take some of the blame for the weekend that he's had, because he looked genuinely like he was struggling a lot. Didn't look on top of the car at all, and looked probably considerably like slower than Carlos, really, for the whole weekend.
Oh, I didn't like that word, considerably. That hit me right in my core. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 as well for Charles. Disappointing weekend, crashed in qualifying. As you say, a clumsy incident which ruined his race because his car was useless. He was fighting Liam Lawson for 15th and lost the position and got it back. And it was just, a weekend to forget. And another Charles mistake in quali. Difficult to watch. Sergio Perez now started 7th, finished 4th. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Checo. Didn't think I was going to be giving him a 6 out of 10 when he was 14 seconds in the lead at the beginning of the race. Obviously, an amazing call at the start to pit and go on to the intermediates, which turned out to be the best call that we saw. And it all just went wrong after that. How he got caught 3 to 4 seconds a lap at the beginning of that initial stint by Max Verstappen is absolutely ludicrous. Some people are like, he was saving tyres. I don't know what he was doing, really. So then he got undercut because, and I don't even feel even the slightest bit like we were robbed because Max was going to clear him one way or another. And then obviously, again, he came into the pits, aquaplaned, hit the wall, sped in the pit lane by 0.8 of a kilometre of an hour, which is obviously a little bit unlucky. But yeah, he doesn't deserve any more than the 6, unfortunately.
I've also gone for a 6 out of 10. It's a weird one because I've seen a lot of people mention that, oh, when's Perez going to get some luck? But, you know, he had that good fortune
what
where
more
he was,
do you need?
And me and you were obviously watching the race together in person, and the first thing we said was, that's Checo won the race, and then you started seeing how much quicker Max was, and it was like, oh, okay, maybe not.
Speaking of his teammate, Max Verstappen started first, finished first.
Yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 again. I don't think Max has had anything but 10 out of 10 for ages, but this just shows that all the talk of like, oh, he's got the best car on the grid, which is of course true. Even in a race like that, you know, Max isn't just winning from pole really easily. He's just driving absolutely crazy well, and you're just running out of ways to praise him really. And it's not to take anything away from him. It's just he's just driving so well. Yeah, it's 10 out of 10.
I've also gone for a 10 out of 10, and this race for me was a race where I don't think anybody can even, it doesn't matter what camp you're in, Team LH, wherever, you cannot say that Max Verstappen is not an unbelievable driver. The way that he adapted to those conditions, yes, in the best car, he dominates the sport better than anyone I've ever seen, I would say. The way in which he has won 9 in a row and looks untouchable is incredible to watch. How quickly he caught Perez was quite frankly a joke, and then just seemed completely and utterly, the whole race was under control from him. So yeah, well done Max Verstappen. That is the most 10 out of 10 race I think we've seen from him in a long time. We need to now crown our P1. That is difficult considering I've just hyped the life out of Max Verstappen and how he drove that race. No, we're still going to go with Fernando Alonso for me, purely because he drove an unbelievable race. The moves he made on lap 1 were race defining for him, I would say, in terms of mounting a charge for that P2. Fernando for me.
Fernando for me as well. Unbelievable drive in a car that probably shouldn't be where it is, and what he's doing, you know, so late into his career when he's had a break from Formula 1 and come back is nothing short of remarkable. And
thank you everybody for tuning in to this Amsterdam Hotel F1 driver ratings edition for the Dutch Grand Prix. Right, that is it. Thank you everybody for watching and listening, and we'll see you very soon for another piece of content. Goodbye.
bye.